Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Justin Brown. I'm the founder of Hillvets, a nonprofit entity here in the DC area. We're the network for veterans in DC, Congress, bill politics, etc. This room to me is a pretty incredible place. Worked in this room in about 4 or 5 different capacities. Testified in this room numerous times. In 2007, 8, 9. Really some of the key pivotal moments of the wars overseas. Pushed for post 9/11 GI Bill in a number of instances here. Highlighted unemployment issues, stating that there were more unemployed Iraq and Afghanistan veterans here in the United States than there were serving in those conflicts at the time. So they were pretty intense times in terms of the benefits and healthcare delivery for our nation's veterans. And those fights continue to go on. We've got healthcare being kind of a key in-the-moment issue as it stands right now. But in addition, speaking of the past, I'd like to talk really quickly about the Atlantic Council. I think a lot of people are probably wondering, how does a group like the Atlantic Council mesh with Hillvets, the Telling Project? What a lot of people don't know is that it was an organization actually founded largely by veterans. In post-World War II, there was a big push to make sure that never happened. And people started asking the questions, what do we have to do to educate and get the word out about what these conflicts are, what they mean, and what their global impact is. Certainly think of that in the context of a time when the world was not nearly as global as it is today. So I'm proud of the fact that one of the big things that Atlantic Council has continued to do in owning that part of their history is to empower other veterans in moving the ball forward, if you will. So they launched a program called the Take Point Initiative, which is largely focused on helping veterans become engaged in the international policy space, as well as taking on some incredible personal projects of their own. To tell you a little bit about that, Hillvets was a huge component of this program, or at least it was a huge program for us last year when we participated. In the years since we participated in that program, we've really grown as an organization. The Atlantic Council has really wrapped their hands around what we're doing and helped us in providing us key points of contacts. They've helped us with funding. They've helped us with anything that we've needed to come to them for, as well as giving us an incredibly awesome cohort of fellow peers and veterans who are really just trying to do incredible things as they continue to move forward. So I'm super proud of our relationship with the Atlantic Council, as well as the Telling Project. This is the second year we're doing this program. Last year, I would be lying if I told you I wasn't completely taken aback. It was incredible, and everybody that came thought the same. So no pressure for our 3 performers today. But just really quickly, I'd lastly like to point out just some of the veterans who are involved in this year's cohort. They're doing some incredible projects. I would encourage you to check them out on a more detailed level. Everything from moving towards the Iraq and Afghanistan Memorial on the Mall, which we all, I'm sure, agree at some point, juncture, is something that needs to happen. We've got female veterans that are trying to take it to the next level to continue assisting female veterans. We have folks from Canada who are coming in and just seeing what it is that we're doing, and if there's anything here to take home, I suppose. So real quickly, I'd like to also thank Congressman Walz and his team, his staff. Aaron Kleinman really did a lot of the heavy lifting and pulling everything together today. Molly Murray from the Atlantic Council is pretty much the one that really makes everything happen. I just get to stand up here and throw stuff out. So without ado, let me introduce Max Raynor. Max is the co-creator of the Telling Project. Let me do that over. Max Raynor is the co-creator of the Telling Project process. He's a South African Fulbright scholar who has written, produced, and/or directed for the Telling Project on a dozen productions. Max, the floor is yours.
opportunity. There's, of course, Justin and Hillvets, who have been incredible in their support. There's the Millennium Leadership Program and the incredible Take Point Initiative, which I was lucky enough to attend last year and was blown away by the quality, the intellectual ferocity, the kind of brilliance of the people that you attract to that program. And that is a credit to Jonathan and Daniel, and also Molly, for the incredible work that they do. We have to thank the Bob Woodruff Foundation for their support as well. And the Telling Project wouldn't be the organization that it is without the Bob Woodruff Foundation, and I'm sure that you feel the same in the Millennium Leadership Program. I want to talk very briefly, because I'm not important here. What's important is the stories of veterans. But I wanted to speak briefly about what the Telling Project does. We're a non-partisan, not-for-profit organization. And what we do is that we travel the country. We've done 48 productions across the country since 2008. And we interview veterans, we transcribe, and family members. We transcribe those interviews. We shape those interviews into a performance script that we then hand back to the veterans whose stories they purport to tell. Those veterans then tell us all the ways that we've screwed it up, and to go back and to keep working, and to make sure that it is the story that they want to tell. Those self-same veterans and family members then receive performance training and rehearsal, and then they tell their stories directly to the civilian communities in which they are making their homes. The basic premise here is that the idea of coming home is something which is a shared responsibility. It's not up to the veterans to do all the lifting. There's a civic duty in civilian populations. It's the most basic of civic duties. And this goes across any bridge, any divide. The most basic of civic duties is the act of listening. What it means to understand the experience of people who are not like yourself. What it means to understand the experience of people who have gone and served in your name, regardless of your politics. The basic premise here is that we share this social space, and that we want to have this conversation in a good faith, candid way. This year's cohort, I guess, of Telling Project performers, what strikes me about their stories is something that I think speaks to the larger project of the Telling Project, but also that of Hillvets and the Take Point Initiative, which is the idea of empathy. The simple fact that when we listen to each other, we grow to understand each other. It is incumbent on civilian organizations to listen to, and civilians in general, to listen to each other and to listen to veterans. And that's something that should happen on a grassroots level, right? I think so much of the isolation that veterans feel in Lansing, Michigan, or in Orlando, Florida, or in any of the places that we've been, I think a lot of the isolation that they feel is that civilians don't know how to ask questions, and veterans don't really know how to speak about their experience. And so what we do is we bridge that gap. Now that should happen on a grassroots level, but that should also happen at the level of policy creation. And in that way, I think that Hillvets is really leading the charge. And I think in that way, the Take Point Initiative is also taking charge of what that means. It means that you listen to what veterans know. They know the on-the-ground conditions. They know what their own experience is like. They have things to contribute. And that listening to veterans within those spaces is important to, at the top levels, at the policy-making levels, is important to shifting the culture on the grassroots level. And so I thank you for the wonderful work that you do, both with Hillvets and at the Atlantic Council. And without further ado, I want to hand over to the people that you're actually here to listen to. I could jabber all day. And hand over to Brian and David and Alicia in no particular order. Please step forward.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Brian's not ready. David?
I'm like half
Half ready. Let's get really ready. I'm ready.
All right, now, you can keep doing your speeches.
especially.
I know. Ever since I was a young teenager, I had a strong impulse to serve, to wear the uniform, to be part of something bigger than myself. I always wanted to go to West Point, but I didn't get in.
Hey, David.
I did. I got close. I went to the University of South Florida for a year, and I did ROTC, and then I transferred up to Cornell. Brian, did you get into Cornell?
No.
Anyway, I remember very well the day I graduated. I was standing outside the stadium where the ceremony just concluded, and I was walking with a group of my friends. And one of my friends' parents came up and started asking everybody what their plans were for after graduation. It was my friend's mother. And her face lit up when they were saying things like, oh, corporate jobs, I'm gonna go work for Microsoft, or I'm going to grad school in physics or something. They talked about finance and accounting and consulting. And then she got to me, and she was like, what are your plans for after graduation? I very proudly stood there and said, I'm going to join the Army as a commissioned officer. She paused, and she said,
Why would you want to do that?
the scorn and the judgment in her voice has haunted me ever since.
My grandfather served in the Army, but he died when my dad was only 5, so I never really knew him. My uncle was drafted to Vietnam and finally came home after 3 Purple Hearts. My aunt also joined to escape our small town, but it wasn't really a family thing. I went to college. I did a double major in studio art and media production. I like to draw. I mean, I'm kind of free-spirited, maybe even a bit of a secret hippie. Can't tell right now, but... After college, I wanted to travel and see the world. I'm from a small town in Indiana. Still today, neither of my parents have a passport. I thought the Army would be a real adventure. But I can still remember waking up on the morning of 9/11, and I felt this sense of patriotism, like serving was the right thing to do. And so in 2003, I enlisted in the Army Reserves.
I grew up in a very small town. It had a university, and most of my friends just went there. I wanted to do something a bit more challenging, more uncomfortable. I knew pretty early on in high school that I was going to join the military. The military academy at West Point appealed to me because of the history and the camaraderie. Yet again, took a slight commitment, including a letter of recommendation from a congressman, physical and medical evaluations. I started West Point in 2005.
I can remember taking the oath of enlistment. Still today, I can feel it right here in my chest. I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, and bear true faith and allegiance to the same. I will obey the orders of the President and the officers appointed over me according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God.
Move, scum!
Get off my butt!
Move, move!
What are you looking
You
at?
think this is your mama's house?
Line up! Attention! Ready!
Left face!
Right face!
Left face!
About face!
Left face! Mark time! March! Left, 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 right!
All these drill sergeants yelling at you. At the beginning, I was afraid. They tried to intimidate you. These first 2 weeks, I was exhausted. I thought, I gotta get the heck out of here. Then I remember this one woman.
Company! Up!
She was tough and mean, and then she yelled,
It looks like doo-doo the way you're lined up.
and I thought to myself, you can't be mean and yell doo-doo.
Well, at West Point, your first year is pretty intense. But in a lot of ways, it's just like the average college freshman experience. You're adjusting to life away from home, new environment, new friends, new identity.
Sounds really challenging.
Right?
Except, the upperclassmen yell at you a lot. You really don't have time to party or go explore. It's very regimented and demanding.
Absorb this information!
Produce results!
Faster!
Sleep less, cadet!
All of which is great for producing quality military officers, but not really for producing the most free-thinking, open-minded individuals. But when you graduate, you're commissioned as a second lieutenant.
I was commissioned in 2007.
I commissioned in 2009.
I
I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter. So help me God.
So help me God.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, I think I probably was gonna forget which line I'm supposed to say right now. But it wasn't in 2009.
You went to New York.
Yes, I moved to New York. So, after about 6 months of basic training at Fort Jackson in South Carolina and advanced individual training, me and my 3 giant duffel bags, I should have forgot that because they were huge, went to New York City. My dad says that if I could carry those giant duffel bags, I could do anything. I wanted to work in media. But you know, I was going to be in the reserves, drill 1 week in a month, maybe 2 weeks in the summer. So I moved to New York, moved in with 2 gay guys, a cat with half a tail, and this tiny little dog that looked ferocious through the window. But she wasn't at all. I lived there for almost 6 years. I mean, they really became a family. It still feels like home today. And I didn't have a job, so I basically walked the streets of New York with a communications degree. And one day on 47th Avenue, I walked into an AT&T store and got a job doing sales. But within a few months, my unit needed recruiters. There were the wars both going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. I looked at how much money I'd make on active duty, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do it. But recruiting is intense. They make you practice your recruitment pitch. They teach you how to be a salesperson. They even make you face the wall and pretend to do phone calls. Hey David, I hear you're about to be a senior.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans when you graduate?
Oh, not really.
Then they coach you to say things like this. David, you know what? I felt the same way myself. And you know what I found out was? That the Army has all the answers.
Sweet.
And they even videotape you and the entire room stares at you. And better yet, then they grade you. And you know, I'm an okay speaker, but maybe you can tell, I'm not the best actress. And I ended up spending actually 5 years recruiting in New York City from the mid to late 2000s. In the early years under George Bush, wearing your uniform on the streets, you might get dirty looks or even spit at. And then Obama came into office, and like night and day it switched, and all of a sudden people wanted to buy you your meal on a regular basis. But you know, in the end what I actually found out is that it's really best just to be honest and try to help your applicants find what they want, and that's really what works best. West Point?
Yo. I finally graduated and got a few months of paid leave. Then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for the infantry officer basic course. That was probably the most fun experience of my life. About a third of my class were West Pointers, so it felt like a class reunion. Except instead of living in the barracks, you're making officer pay and living in apartments. You're doing very physical and demanding things, but you're doing it with quality and motivated people. Guys who can do anything physically, motivated, smart, looking at big problems, big issues, and trying to solve them. And then we all did Ranger School together. Looking back, that was probably the best course I did in the Army, even if I don't remember all of it. We slept between 0 and 4 hours a night, and they pushed us physically and mentally. It taught me to keep going when I really didn't have much left in the tank, and to look out for my buddies. Everybody had a night when they really needed help from somebody else. I even saw unicorns and shit one night. Then I went to Germany and worked in the 172nd Separate Infantry Brigade. I was stationed in northern Bavaria.
I was stationed in Bavaria too.
Not a competition, dude.
I was there first. I was trained as a field artillery officer in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Field artillery, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, has a number of different elements. You can be a fort observer, stationed with the infantry and moving around and calling in indirect fire, or you can be on the gun line, leading a howitzer platoon and actually shooting the howitzers. You can also be in the Fire Direction Center, which actually coordinates between the two of those. I did some of those things, but I had a really non-standard Army career. When I got to my unit in April 2008 in Germany, they were already deployed. So I was in Germany for about 6 weeks before I deployed as well. It's weird, you know, it's been more than 8 years since I came back from that deployment, but I still remember so much of it. I could actually relive it almost day by day. Just the sights and the sounds and the smells. it's all stayed with me. I was in a place called Fob Warhorse in the Diyala River Valley. It's in a small outpost too. Iraq is broadly divided between Sunni in the north and Shia in the south. But the Diyala River Valley is a mixture of both, and it gets really complicated. If you're in a village that has it's a different sect majority from the district mayor or something, you might not get essential services. So we spent a lot of our time driving around, going to district governance meetings and mediating disputes and negotiating and things like that. It was complicated, but by the time I got there, the violence wasn't as bad as it had been in previous years. There was a lot of tension, but the tension was always there, and it was just an odd place. There was a really strange phenomenon. We'd be driving around, and I was always in the lead vehicle, and there'd be these donkeys on the side of the road, and they'd see our convoy coming, and they'd stand up, they'd walk in front of the road, and they would stop right there. The first time this happened, I was like, all right, that's weird, donkey standing in front of my convoy, that's kind of funny. But it happened over and over and over again. I'm like, these donkeys seem suicidal. It's like they realize, I'm a donkey, or even worse, I'm a donkey in Iraq. I gotta say though, no matter how many times it happened, we never hit one. That was always very important. You know, it wasn't all weird stuff like that. There were some really bright spots too. We had our district governance meetings at the local library. And I love this because I love books, and libraries have lots of books. So I would go there and say, hey, what kind of books do you guys have? I would bring my interpreter, go talk to the librarians, and it was really interesting. And then I tried to learn Arabic. It's like, Assalamu alaikum, marhaba, shukran. I said a few things just well enough that they thought I spoke better than I did, and I understood just enough of what they said to misinterpret what they actually meant. And there was this one time, I don't even remember how it came up, but one of the guys, he said he spoke a little German. I got really excited. I was like, hey, das freut mich, jetzt können wir uns miteinander unterhalten. And he was like, no, it's not that good, it's not that good, slow down. I was like, oh, too bad. I always wanted to form personal connections with these people because I thought it was just absolutely critical to develop empathy. And really, what I found out over time, not just there, but in the years since, is that language is the cornerstone of empathy.
So in 2009, I finally left active duty, or as I like to call it, I escaped recruiting. And until today, I thought I escaped my acting career. And I rejoined the reserves, and I changed my job over to civil affairs. So in civil affairs, you basically inform the commander about the civilian population. And when I arrived at my reserve unit, I pretty much got orders to deploy right away. And when I deployed, we did things with the infantry and combat arms and did tactical operations, but at the end of the day, our job was to inform the commander about the local population, work with the host nation and other international agencies, and or as we like to say, inform the command about the good people, the white cell, rather than what the other side might say, the red cell or enemy combatants. Afghanistan was the greatest and the hardest year of my life, all wrapped into one. It changes you, and you can never leave that behind.
What did you do there? What kind of operations?
But I met a lot of good Afghans when I was in Afghanistan, and they tell you, when you're doing training before you go, they tell you as a woman, there's things you're not going to be able to do. And so, you prepare yourself. They say you're going to a Muslim country, it's conservative, you're a woman, you can't do these things. But ironically, what I found out was you actually can do those things. I didn't really have to compete to see who was tougher or whose beard was bigger. And actually, as a Western female, a lot of times you could actually get more things done. And I was stationed in Camp Nathan Smith in Kandahar City. I was one of the first surge units in 2011, and my team had 3 of the most dangerous districts in the city, so we went to the field a lot. We did clearing operations, a couple instances of small arms fire, but nothing too crazy. I never actually had to return fire. I actually had a really good time. My team was like a family. I really enjoyed it. And so Yeah, I did, I met nice people. And so, I know, right? So the stories kind of all run together because they're really awesome and they keep living with you every day. So sometimes over time, it's hard to actually break that down in your mind and piece it back. Because still today, a lot of my good friends, I met a young man and his name was Noor. He was just 19 years old when I met him. And now he has a wife and children, and he's always sending me photos. And it's kind of funny because I would worry about him and wonder how he's doing, and then all of a sudden I'll get these messages. If anyone has WhatsApp, it makes communication great. So he'll send me a message, like recently, he's like, Guffey, I haven't heard from you, are you okay? And I'm like, wait, Noor, I haven't heard from you, are you okay? And I'm like, why are you worried? And he said to me, oh, I heard there was this really bad weather in the US. I'm like, you mean the hurricane in Florida? I live in DC. Yeah, this isn't how this is supposed to work, Noor. And I also met another young girl named Miriam, and we actually did hero payments for her brother and her dad that were both killed in the line of duty as correction officers. And I remember this one time when we were in the middle of doing the hero payments, and the interpreter said something, and then the interpreter translated what her mother said, and then all of a sudden Marianne piped up and said, actually, that's not what my mom said. And no one knew she spoke English, and I was just really astonished that there in that moment, this young 19-year-old girl had the courage to speak up in a room full of men. And those kind of memories will always stick with you. I think when you get past the idea of the Taliban and the insurgents, and you really just focus on the average everyday Afghans, yeah, I mean, they're really good people, and those kind of memories you can really never leave them behind.
I also went to Afghanistan.
Of course you did.
I was lucky on my deployments. I never got shot at. Never got my combat action badge. I have plenty of friends who've had to, and some are still dealing with it. Most of them are fine, but if you didn't make it back. The 172nd was heavy infantry, and then we transitioned to light before the deployment to Afghanistan. For the first 3 months, I was the support platoon leader. I was in charge of logistics convoys, basically just moving stuff between different bases in our area of operations. Afghanistan was really kind of boring. The biggest thing I remember was that since we came right at the end of the surge, the measures of performance and measures of effectiveness were constantly changing. From where I was standing, it looked like we were just producing data points to please higher command. How many local nationals did you talk to? How many of them are in our system? How much ordnance did you drop? I just kept asking myself, why are we here? What's our strategy? And what are our long-term objectives? Now, of course, I guess it's ironic that I still have friends and classmates going back there on rotations years after we thought we'd be done. Even at West Point, I understood that the military personnel management system tends to produce people that follow orders and try to please their bosses. Oftentimes it seems like it's more what the boss wants than what's actually needed or effective on the ground to produce long-term results. Over in Afghanistan, I got more friendly with the guys going outside the wire, than I was with my colleagues in the operations center. These are the guys interacting with Afghans on a daily basis, and sometimes getting shot at. I wanted a sense of their experience and what they were dealing with. And while I was over there, I was working on my Master's of Public Administration. So I was reading all about how policy is defined at the top, and seeing firsthand how it trickles down to what's happening on the ground. At the same time, I was talking to my friends coming from outside the wire, and comparing their experiences with my reading and research.
Two days after I came home from Iraq, I met the woman who became my wife. She's German. Germany's my second home now. We go back almost every year. Actually, every year since we've been back in the States. We were together for about a year and a half when I had to deploy to Afghanistan. We were engaged by then, so it was a lot harder to leave. I also had a different job compared to the first time. By that point, I'd been promoted to captain. I was promoted to captain like 2 days before we deployed. So I was a staff guy, right? And they put me in what they call the counter IED cell. So I was a counter IED analyst. What the hell does that mean? So I was in charge of figuring out tactics, techniques, procedures, trends, hotspots, everything that was referred to as IED activity, right? We put that in quotes because it really means bombs blowing up. And I was in a pretty dangerous area in southern Afghanistan. It was between Kandahar and Zabul. It's a place called Highway 1. And we lost 12 people the first couple months we were there. Every time there was an explosion, I felt a personal responsibility for what had happened. Even though it wasn't realistic to assume that I could stop everything, and it wasn't really my job to do that, I still wondered, were there patterns that I'd missed? Was information there? Is that fire drill? Is it? Oh god. That's kind of funny. Anyway, I was worried about patterns that I'd missed and things that could have kept people alive. Sorry, that took me out. This is actually kind of a rough section. When we did this 2 days ago, I had something happen, reliving this that hadn't happened since I came back. And you know, when someone was killed, what would happen would be is that the entire unit would march up to the helicopter pad, helicopter landing zone, our boots crunching on the gravel, and we'd stand in a formation, and they would take the person who had been killed, the squad mates and the friends of the person who had been killed, they'd load them on a stretcher, covered in an American flag, and then they'd walk out to the helicopters and load them up, and we'd salute as they fly away. The first time that happened, I was heartbroken. Then it happened again, and it happened again. And every time it happened again, I felt a little bit less. I was less connected. I noticed this, and I was like, am I becoming less emotionally connected to what I'm doing here? Or do I have to become less emotionally connected in order to do this for 12 months? And I realized more this week than really ever before that when you're at war, you have to bury that emotion. And it's really important to find it again when you come home.
When I got back, most of my unit went back to the East Coast, but I went home to Indiana. My aunt had passed away about 2 weeks before, so I never got to say goodbye to her. Life was pretty much never the same. I was separated from my team, who I was extremely close to. And it's funny because in the Army, there's this culture, just go, 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 do, 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 and you feel like you're changing the world. And then you come home and people are worried about things like, what kind of shoes are they gonna wear? And I was like, oh. Although I won't lie, today that's really important to me, what kind of shoes I'm gonna wear, and I struggle with it. And in 2011, I finally got my commission.
Oh.
Officers. And then I quickly went on a second deployment to Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. I think there was just a part of me that I couldn't really slow down. I just had to keep moving.
I also went to Africa.
Did he now?
After I got back from Afghanistan, I went through the Civil Affairs course and worked out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Eventually I deployed to Niger in charge of a 4-person Civil Affairs team. We worked primarily out of the capital, Niamey. There we coordinated with the U.S. Embassy, Department of State, USAID, the host nation military, as well as other special operations and military elements like the Green Berets and the Air Force. As Civil Affairs, your job is to be the civil and cultural expert. Anytime another military guy had a question about a development project or an ethnic or tribal group, they'd come to you. It was more academic work, more thinking based, but it required the ability to operate in very ambiguous environments. I studied French and Arabic at West Point, and I went through French language training as part of the Civil Affairs course. So I was pretty good at French. And being able to communicate over there was so essential. I remember this one night, we were sitting around talking with some of the security forces. They were Nigerian army guys who were providing us with protection. And one of the sergeants just started getting into it about how he couldn't stand the French people because they're a former colonial power and he felt like they never left. I heard that a lot from the Nigerian army guys. It was so complex over there. I mean, essentially, we're there doing counterterrorism work. And yes, there were elements of radical Islam. But it's way more complicated than that. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. There's drought, famine, migration, trafficking, corruption. Just created more questions in my mind. The US doesn't do anything that's not in its national interest. We're not there out of a moral obligation. We're there to further our national interest. We're training and arming our military, so we insist on a say on what that military does. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just the rules of the game when you look at it as a realist. And there are a lot of other countries there doing exactly the same thing. Still, while I was over there, I couldn't help asking deeper questions. What was our real strategy? What were we trying to accomplish? What was our mission? I eventually ran into a brick wall while I was in Niger. I had to stand up to command. They kept telling me to perform, and I just tried to pump the brakes and tell them, we need to think about this a little bit more. That didn't sit too well with them. By their standards, I didn't perform well in Niger. I was just trying to think a little bit more critically, ask questions, and try to get some longer-term effects. The Army's an institution that's designed to get things done. It exists to fight and win our wars, and it's very important that it continues to do so. But when you're operating in very ambiguous and complex environments, you still have to be able to think critically, to ask tougher questions, and to take the time to process the information that's available. Sometimes you need to just take a few breaths, execute some tactical patience, and wait for things to develop. Within the special operations community in Africa, it was always do more, kill more bad guys, go, go, go. I just couldn't blindly perform the way they wanted me to. It was a very stressful and difficult time, and ultimately, it led to my decision to get out of the Army and pursue a career that allows for deeper questioning.
So, when I came back from Afghanistan, my service obligation was already up, and I had already sent in my paperwork to get out. And I got back, and I found out that my unit had lost it. So I had to stay for an extra year. It turned out to be an okay thing, it wasn't bad, but it was just one more element and added to the list of things that I was thinking to myself, do I really want to do this anymore? You know, I went back and forth about it for a long time about whether I wanted to stay in or get out. You know, I loved wearing the uniform, I loved being a part of a team, I loved having a mission and a sense of purpose, but the deployments hadn't been easy, and by that time, my wife and I got married and I wasn't sure I could do another year away from her. So I decided that it was the right thing to do, and I got out. And one of the things that it took a while to kind of come to terms with was the fact that I'm not really a risk and adventure guy, I'm much more of a book guy. And that was hard to admit. You know, I'd spent 5 years in the Army, I really wanted to be the ground guy, and then afterward I was like, you know, I'm much more of an academic type. So I went to grad school, and I got a master's degree at Columbia in International Affairs, and then when I graduated there, I came to DC, and I've been working at the Institute for Defense Analyses for 2.5 years.
I'm actually still in the reserves, or maybe the Army's still working its magic on me. I actually think about getting out all the time. and I'm right there ready to do it. And it seems like every time I think I want to get out, then I get pulled back in because this idea of being connected to something bigger than myself and trying to make a change. But then again, the administrative hassles and the wear and tear on your body that the Army takes, I mean, it really isn't fun. But when you're deployed and you work with soldiers and you get to lead soldiers, that you can't find that anywhere else. And that's really what I love. And now I'm actually doing a fellowship at the State Department for Veterans, and I truly feel honored because not many veterans get that kind of opportunity. And on the good side, they actually treat me really well. So I actually got to meet Secretary Kerry, even got a handshake with a photo. So it doesn't just look good on my resume. But also I feel like I'm connected to something bigger than myself again.
My time in Niger facilitated a desire to do more research and ask deeper questions. I just got out in September and immediately started a PhD program with the Geneva Graduate School of Governance in Geneva, Switzerland. It'll be a 3-year process to complete my dissertation. I'm still an active base jumper. I practice martial arts, and I just got back from Rishikesh, India, where I took a yoga instructor course. So I'd like to say I'm still a bit of a badass. But I just like to keep the body moving and engaged on multiple levels. It helps me keep evolving no matter what I'm doing. I'm truly grateful for all of my experiences in the Army, even the bad ones. It's made me a stronger person and a better researcher. But I'm ready for the next adventure.
Well, I'm not quite as much of a badass, but I've been thinking lately about how I really want to get back into doing more artwork again in my creative self. I mean, all the time rolling through my mind, I'm thinking about all the things that I want to write or do or try to make. And I actually came up with an idea to do a podcast. And it was a podcast on LGBT veterans. And it's called the Ask and Tell Project. Because really, I stopped and I thought, and I said, you know, since the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, nobody's really been talking what it was like to be serving, either during, before, or after. You don't hear the good or the bad stories from veterans. And I think it's really important. And ironically, I actually met a producer in New York that had no connection to the subject or the military, and he wanted to partner with me to do a web series or documentary. And I ended up actually being interviewed for the documentary. I didn't plan to, I didn't want to do it. I'm kind of a private person, and it's funny because I think that, you know, what if I'd had a career in the media of the arts? Would have my life been completely different? Would I have been more free? And when I think about myself and my other veteran friends, nobody really cares who anyone dates or about their sexuality, but yet the military and the institution still seem to care. The policy change doesn't really change the culture within the institution, and I honestly feel that we as leaders have a responsibility to promote a more inclusive military culture.
I'm writing my dissertation about U.S. grand strategy in Africa. I want to ask deeper questions that go beyond the counterterrorism and regional instability narratives. Hopefully I can develop a methodology that can be replicated for other parts of the world and give us a better understanding and context for our wars. As a society, we really need to start asking the uncomfortable questions right now. Military training teaches you to be slightly more comfortable than most in uncomfortable environments. It's the same type of discomfort, just a little bit different. It's really dangerous to have a disconnect or hostility between the intellectual discourse and the people who are executing foreign policy. You don't want intellectuals discounting the experiences of people on the ground, and you certainly don't want the people on the ground performing in a complete vacuum.
I went to an Ivy League school, and I wanted to serve my country, and that woman on the day I graduated, she saw something wrong with that. And I've never understood it. I still don't understand it. I mean, what's the problem? Cornell had has a rich military history. We commissioned more officers during the First World War than any other institution, including West Point. All 8 of the Ivies have memorials to fallen graduates and faculty member. So what changed? I mean, Vietnam is the clear, obvious turning point, right? But we had protests on campus, we had ROTC programs dissolved across the country, we had the divestment of the military recruiting in the Northeast, basically the application of civic responsibility from a certain part of the country. And this matters, right? I mean, my anecdotal evidence is that there are a lot of people inside the federal government who went to Ivy League schools. But how many Ivy League graduates serve in the military? It's not many. It's a missed opportunity to build connection and empathy between 2 pillars of American society. And when it comes down to it, when civilian leaders debate discussions about sending soldiers to war, they should know some of the people that they're sending. And the soldiers who get sent should know that the civilians who sent them have their back. That empathy, that connection, the ability to understand how somebody else might feel in a different situation is so important. David Eisler, United States Army.
Alicia Guffey, United States Army.
Brian Donnelly, United States Army.